there is a hole in the ceiling, 27 feet across, open to the sky. No glass, no screen, no mechanism to close it. When it rains, the water falls straight into the building and drains through channels in the marble floor designed for exactly this purpose. The oculus, the eye. The opening at the center of the Pantheon's dome that has been letting in the same circle of light, traveling across the same interior, landing on the same walls, for nearly 1900 years. The Pantheon was built in the reign of the Emperor Hadrian, around 125 AD. It has been in continuous use since the day it opened, longer than any other building in the world. Longer than any church in Christendom, longer than any cathedral, longer than any structure that currently houses an active human institution. It was a temple to all the gods of Rome, then a Christian church, and it is a church still. The oculus has been open through all of it. Rain falls through it on Sundays during Mass and drains into the floor, and the congregation continues. Modern architects look at the dome and see a problem they still cannot fully explain. The concrete used to build it, a volcanic ash mixture called pozzolana, combined with lime and aggregate, the formula the Romans developed across 2 centuries of iterative engineering, does not behave the way modern concrete does. It grows stronger with time rather than weaker, particularly in contact with water. The Romans did not know the chemistry. They knew the results. They built for eternity, and in the matter of the Pantheon, they achieved something close to it. This is a video about what Rome actually was, not the ruins you see in photographs, bleached white and empty. The living city, at the moment of its maximum power, in the reign of an emperor who was simultaneously the most powerful man on earth and a trained architect who understood exactly what he was building. The city that should not have been possible. In 125 AD, the city of Rome contained approximately 1 million people. To understand what this means, you need a comparison. The next city in human history to reach 1 million inhabitants would be Victorian London, around 1,817 centuries later. For most of recorded history, between the height of Rome and the Industrial Revolution, no city on Earth approached what Rome had achieved. 1 million people require water. They require food. They require waste removal. They require housing, fuel, light, and some mechanism for maintaining the social order among a population dense enough that a single epidemic or a single breakdown in supply could kill thousands within days. Every civilization before Rome had solved these problems inadequately, had built cities of 50 or 100,000 people, and encountered the walls that agricultural technology and pre-industrial logistics imposed. Rome broke through those walls, and it did so not through any single invention, but through the systematic application of engineering to every problem that density created. Begin with the water. 11 aqueducts brought fresh water from mountain sources up to 90 kilometers distant, using nothing but the mathematics of gradient and the structural integrity of stone arches to move rivers of water across the landscape by gravity alone. No pumps. No power source. Just precise calculation of slope applied over extraordinary distances. At its peak, Rome's aqueduct system delivered approximately 1 billion liters of water per day, roughly 1,000 liters per person. which exceeds the per capita water consumption of many modern cities. This water fed the public fountains at every street corner, free, constant, clean, that made Rome a city where thirst was a problem that had been solved. It fed the public baths, where the most humble citizen had access to heated pools, exercise rooms, libraries, and gardens that the kings of contemporary societies could not have matched. It fed the private households of the wealthy and the communal facilities of the insulae, the apartment buildings, 6 and 7 stories high, that made Rome, in its urban geometry, not unlike Manhattan vertical, dense, and organized around the infrastructure that kept it functional. Then consider the roads. The Via Appia, the Queen of Roads, begun in 312 BC and extending eventually from Rome to the heel of the Italian boot, was built in layers of stone, gravel, and concrete to specifications that modern road engineers have examined with professional respect. Precisely straight where the terrain allowed. Precisely cambered for drainage. Precisely graded for marching speed. A Roman legion could cover 30 kilometers in a day on these roads, maintaining supply chains across the length of the empire with predictable speed and predictable cost. 80,000 kilometers of paved road connected Scotland to Mesopotamia. At the center of the network, in the Roman Forum, stood the Miliarium Aureum, the golden milestone, the physical point from which all distances in the empire were measured. All roads led to Rome because Rome had built all the roads. The infrastructure of entertainment. In 125 AD, the Colosseum had been standing for 45 years, built by the Flavian emperors on the site of Nero's private lake. It was the largest amphitheater ever constructed, a structure of travertine marble and concrete, capable of holding between 50 and 80,000 spectators, organized with a ticketing system of ceramic and bone tesserae specifying gate, section, and seat number that functioned with the efficiency of a modern stadium. The Velarium, a retractable awning of canvas and rope, operated by sailors from the imperial fleet, could be extended or retracted across the open top to manage sun exposure for the crowd. The engineering required to manage 80,000 people moving through the building, entering, finding seats, exiting, was solved through the vomitoria, the barrel-vaulted corridors that allowed the structure to fill and empty in minutes. The word vomitorium, which has accumulated an incorrect modern association with Roman dining, simply means an opening through which a crowd passes rapidly. The Romans were precise about these things. Beneath the arena floor, the hypogeum, an underground network of corridors, animal cages, mechanical elevators, and stage machinery made possible the theatrical transformations that Roman audiences expected. A forest could rise through the floor. Animals could appear from apparently nowhere. The Romans had decided that spectacle required illusion, and they built the infrastructure for illusion into the foundations of their entertainment architecture. Beside the Colosseum, the Circus Maximus occupied a natural valley between the Palatine and Aventine Hills. A chariot racing venue with a capacity estimated between 150,000 and 250,000 spectators, perhaps a quarter of the city's total population gathering in a single space, organized into 4 color-coded faction teams, the blues, greens, reds, and whites, whose rivalries cut across every social division from emperor to slave. The greatest charioteer of the ancient world, Gaius Apuleius Diocles, won 1,462 races in a career spanning 24 years, and retired wealthy enough to erect a commemorative inscription listing every victory The Romans kept statistics. At the center of the racetrack's spine stood obelisks, transported from Egypt, a deliberate visual statement about what Roman power had achieved. What the pharaohs had erected as monuments to their own divine authority now served as decoration for Roman entertainment. This was not incidental to Roman identity. It was central to it. What Rome actually was, the habit of later centuries of the medieval period, of the Renaissance, of the modern era, has been to look at Rome as a finished thing, a civilization complete in itself, perfect, and then destroyed. This is wrong, and the wrongness matters. Rome was not a finished thing. It was a process, a continuous experiment in the application of organized collective effort to the problems of large-scale human coexistence. The Roman legal system, which insisted that the accused had the right to defense and that guilt required proof, was not a gift from the gods. It was the product of centuries of argument in the Curia, the Senate house that still stands in the Forum, between men who disagreed about what justice required and had developed institutions for managing that disagreement without violence. The concept of Roman citizenship, the legal status that conferred rights, protections, and obligations regardless of ethnic origin, was extended incrementally across 3 centuries, culminating in the Edict of Caracalla in 212 AD, which granted citizenship to virtually all free inhabitants of the empire. This was not altruism. It was practical governance, a larger pool of taxpayers, a larger pool of soldiers, a larger pool of people who identified their own interests with the empire's survival. But it produced something real, a precedent for the idea that political belonging could be constructed rather than inherited. The Roman concrete that built the Pantheon's dome did not fail for 1900 years because the Romans were smarter than modern engineers. It did not fail because they were building for the gods, or because they worked harder, or because the materials were superior in any abstract sense. It did not fail because Roman volcanic ash, combined with seawater and the offshore structures they also built, creates a chemical reaction that reinforces rather than degrades the material over time, a property that modern materials science identified only in the early 21st century by analyzing samples from ancient Roman harbor walls. They did not know this. They knew that the concrete worked. They built with it. The buildings stood. They built more. What was lost and what was not? In the 5th century, the Western Roman Empire stopped functioning as a political unit. The Visigoths sacked Rome in 410 AD. The Vandals sacked it in 455. The last Western emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer in 476 AD, an event that later historians would mark as the end of the ancient world and the beginning of the medieval one. The population of Rome, which had stood at 1 million in Hadrian's time, collapsed over the following century to perhaps 20 or 30,000. The aqueducts stopped functioning as their maintenance infrastructure dissolved. The Circus Maximus fell silent. The Colosseum was still used for events into the 6th century, then fell into disuse, then became a quarry. And yet the barbarian kings who succeeded Rome in the western provinces did not try to erase it. They tried to imitate it. Theodoric the Ostrogoth, who ruled Italy from 493 to 526 AD, maintained Roman administrative structures, employed Roman officials, corresponded in Latin, and described himself explicitly as the continuation of Roman tradition under new management. The Frankish kings adopted Roman titles, Roman ceremonies, and Roman architectural vocabulary. Charlemagne's biographer described him as the new Augustus. The Holy Roman Empire, that medieval political construction that lasted 1,000 years, named itself explicitly in reference to the thing it claimed to continue. The idea of Rome did not die when the empire's political structures collapsed. It migrated into the institutions that replaced them: the Catholic Church, which organized itself along Roman administrative lines and conducted its business in Latin; the legal systems of medieval Europe, which drew directly on Roman jurisprudence; the architectural vocabulary of churches and cathedrals, which took the Roman basilica as their structural template and adapted it to purposes that would have bewildered the Romans who built the originals. We did not stop living in Rome when Rome ended. We live in it still. The Pantheon is still a church. Mass is celebrated there on Sunday mornings under the oculus, with the rain falling through it when the weather requires. The Colosseum is a ruin, but more people visit it annually than attend most living cultural institutions in the world. The Forum is a field of broken marble and weeds between standing columns, and it was a field of broken marble and weeds when the medieval city was built around it. The Roman stones gradually incorporated into new construction the way every civilization incorporates the material of what preceded it. Under Rome today, successive layers of the city's own history. Medieval streets built over imperial foundations, Renaissance palaces built over medieval churches, modern traffic moving above all of it. Every new metro line excavated in Rome produces discoveries. The city has not finished telling archaeologists what it contains. In 125 AD, Hadrian walked through the Pantheon and stood under the oculus and watched the circle of light move across the interior, the way a sundial registers time. He was the most powerful man on earth. He was also a trained architect who had designed buildings and understood what he was standing in. Whether he understood that the building would outlast his empire by 15 centuries, that people 1900 years in his future would stand in the same light and feel the same thing, that is a question the historical record cannot answer. What the record can see is that the building is there. The light is there. The rain falls through and drains through the floor, and the Sunday Mass continues. Rome built for eternity and did not achieve it. Eternity is not available to human institutions. But the Pantheon is close enough that the distinction feels almost technical. I want to be honest about why I keep returning to Rome as a subject, despite the fact that this channel is primarily about the medieval world. It is because you cannot understand the medieval world without understanding what it was the medieval world was trying to recover. Every medieval institution that matters, the church, the legal tradition, the concept of urban life, the architectural vocabulary of power and sacred space, is a medieval version of something Roman. When Charlemagne was crowned in 800 AD, in a ceremony explicitly modeled on Roman imperial ritual, he was doing what every medieval ruler who claimed legitimacy did, reaching back to Rome as the source of the idea of organized civilization. The Dark Ages, a term that historians have largely abandoned as misleading, but that captures something real about the experience of the 5th and 6th centuries in the western provinces, were dark precisely in proportion to the light that had preceded them. The aqueducts stopped. The roads fell into disrepair. The population of cities collapsed. The administrative machinery that had sustained 1 million people in a single city dissolved into something that could not sustain 30,000 in the same space. What I find in Roman history is not a lost golden age or a model to be recovered. What I find is the specific texture of what institutional collapse actually costs, counted in the water that stops flowing, in the roads that flood one season and no one repairs, in the knowledge that is still present in living people, but has no institutional structure to preserve it. When those people die, the pantheon is there. The aqueducts are not. The difference between them is maintenance, the organized collective effort that keeps a thing alive when no single moment of catastrophe destroys it. The Roman Empire did not fall in a single catastrophe. It stopped being maintained, one component at a time, until what had been the most sophisticated administrative machine the ancient world had built became the memory that haunted the medieval world for the next 1,000 years. I'll see you in the dark.